Story 1, they found the tent from the air. A bright, lonely slash of orange against the endless white of the Ural Mountains. From up there it looked peaceful, a little messy maybe, with gear scattered outside. It was only when we landed that the silence hit us. It was the wrong kind of silence. Not the quiet of a sleeping camp, but the hollow, screaming silence of a place where something has gone terribly, terminally wrong. The tent was empty, and it was slit open from the inside. 9 experienced hikers were gone, vanished into a blizzard, leaving behind everything they needed to survive. I was the first ranger on the ground. My job was to find them. I wish I never had. My name is Anatoly Vasiliev. In the winter of 1959, I was a senior ranger with the Northern Urals Search and Rescue Service. My world was snow, rock, and pine. I knew the moods of the mountains, their beauty and their brutality. I was good at my job because I respected the former and feared the latter. The group of 9 student hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, were reported overdue on February 20th. They were all from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Experienced, well-equipped, their planned route was Category 3, the most difficult but well within their capabilities. A few days' delay in winter wasn't cause for panic. Weather happens, but by the 24th a sense of unease had settled over our station. A pilot was dispatched on a flyover of their intended route. That's when they spotted the tent on the eastern slope of Kholat Shakal, a name the local Mansi people call the Mountain of the Dead. The name itself was a shiver down the spine. Was part of the first ground team flown in the next day. The weather was bitter, a deep, penetrating cold that gnawed at any exposed skin. Our helicopter set down a kilometer away, the pilot unwilling to risk the uneven terrain closer to the site. The hike to the tent was eerie. The landscape was a monochrome of white and gray, utterly still. The only sound was the crunch of our snowshoes and the labored pull of our own breath. As we approached, the first wrong detail emerged. There was no smoke. No sign of a fire. In this cold, a fire is your heartbeat. Ted's absence was a flat line. Then we saw the tent. It was pitched on the mountainside, a lonely, vulnerable thing. But it wasn't buried. It was exposed. And surrounding it, scattered haphazardly in the snow, were items of gear. Boots, axes, a pair of trousers, a flask. It looked less like a camp and more like the scene of a rapid, frantic evacuation. Mikhail, one of my junior rangers, called out, his voice swallowed by the vastness. "Hello? Is anyone here?" "Search and rescue." Only the wind answered. We reached the tent. The entrance flaps were laced shut, but a large jagged tear had been cut through the thick canvas wall. Not from the outside, from the inside. I ran my gloved hand along the cut. It was clean, deliberate. Someone had taken a knife and slashed their way out. Why? Mikhail whispered, his face pale. Why would they leave? In a storm without boots? I didn't have an answer. The interior was a snapshot of interrupted life. Backpacks lined the walls. Valuables, cameras, journals, money were left untouched. Sleeping bags were laid out, as if people had just vanished from them. A kettle sat on a small stove. They had been in for the night. Something had made them flee. Anatoly, Mikhail said, his voice tight. He was pointing at the snow near the tear. Footprints. We bent down. They weren't the deep, post-hold prints of people struggling through deep snow. They were faint. The prints of people running or walking quickly, but not sinking. As if the snow had been hard-packed when they made them. They left in a hurry, I said, stating the obvious to mask my own growing dread. But they weren't struggling yet. The snow was firmer. It snowed after, Mikhail finished, his eyes wide. It covered their trail. Whatever happened, it happened before the last snowfall. We followed the faint, sporadic depressions that were all that remained of the trail. They led down the slope towards the tree line, a dark smudge about a kilometer away. The tracks were chaotic, not in a single file, as if they were running together, but not in panic. The spacing was all wrong for a blind flight. About 500 meters from the tent, under the spreading limbs of a large Siberian pine, we found the first two bodies, Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They were lying side by side near the ashes of a fire. They were barefoot, dressed only in their underwear. The scene made no sense. It was 30 degrees. Exposure kills, but it kills slowly. It lulls you into a sleep from which you never wake. It doesn't make you strip off your clothes in a paradoxical final fever. That's what hypothermia does in the final stages. But these men had built a fire. They had fought to live. Mikhail vomited into the snow. I just stood there, my mind refusing to process the scene. These were not the actions of rational men. They were the actions of men terrified beyond reason, or men whose minds were no longer their own. We marked the site and pressed on, the weight of the mystery now a physical pressure on our shoulders. The trail, what little there was of it, continued deeper into the woods. 3 more bodies were found between the pine tree and the tent, frozen in postures that spoke of a grim, determined effort. Igor Dyatlov, the group leader, was found clutching a small branch as if he had been trying to start another fire. Zina Kolmogorova was lying on her stomach, crawling towards the tent, her fingers clawed into the ice. Rustam Slobodin was found nearby, his skull fractured. The official in me noted the injuries. A fall, an avalanche. But the slope was too gentle for a deadly avalanche, and there was no evidence of one. The snow around the tent was undisturbed. And why would an avalanche make them slash their way out of the tent and flee half-dressed? The mystery deepened with the final discovery months later, when the spring thaw revealed the last 4 bodies. They were in a ravine further into the woods, buried under 4 meters of snow. They were better dressed than the others, wearing clothes they had taken from the ones who had already died. It suggested a grim, pragmatic transfer of resources among the dying, but it was their injuries that shattered all our logical explanations. Nikolai Thibault Brignol had a catastrophic skull fracture. Lyudmila Dubinina had massive chest fractures and was missing her tongue. Not cut out. Torn out by what? Alexander Kolovatov and Alexander Zolotarev had severe internal trauma. The coroner would later compare their injuries to those of a car crash victim. But there were no cars on the mountain of the dead. No rocks had fallen on them. There was no evidence of a struggle with an animal or another person. It was as if they had been subjected to an immense crushing force. The official investigation closed. The cause of death was listed as a compelling natural force. The files were classified. The families were given a sanitized version. The world moved on, but I couldn't. I've spent a lifetime in these mountains, and I know what I saw. I've run through every logical possibility. Avalanche. The physics are wrong. The slope was too shallow. The tent was still standing, and the pattern of flight doesn't fit. You run away from an avalanche not parallel to it. Military testing? The area was closed to hikers for years after, which is suspicious. We heard strange lights in the sky were reported that night. Could it have been a secret missile? A misfired weapon that forced them to flee, perhaps? But it doesn't explain the internal injuries with no external wounds. It doesn't explain the stripped clothes infrasound. The wind howling over the mountain ridges can create low-frequency sound waves that can induce panic, irrational terror, even physical resonance in the body. Was it a natural infrasound event that drove them mad, that made them feel like they were burning up, that caused their bodies to vibrate themselves to death from the inside? It's a theory, a terrifying one, that the mountain itself can sing a song that shatters minds and bursts organs. Yetis. Madness. I've heard all the theories. I dismiss none of them completely anymore. The truth is, I don't know what happened on Kholat Syakhl that night, and that is the source of the true enduring horror. Not a monster you can see, but a mystery you can never solve. Story 2. The first thing that struck Ranger Evan Hayes was the dust. It lay over everything in the Whispering Ridge watchtower like a shroud, so thick he could write his name on the console. The reassignment had been sudden, a terse email offering a period of quiet reflection after the incident with the fire. He'd expected a remote post, but not one that felt so utterly abandoned. As he dragged his finger through the grime on the message ledger, he found the last entry, dated September 18th, 1982. The script was a frantic, spidery scrawl. They are not wolves. They walk on two legs. The light does not scare them. God help the next one who comes here. The radio crackled to life behind him, a voice he knew to be impossible slicing through the static. Hayes, you finally made it. We've been waiting for 40 years to clock out. Evan turned, but the tower was empty. The voice had come from the speaker, and it had used his name. The initial panic was a cold knife in his gut. He fumbled for the microphone, his hands shaking. Dispatch, this is Whispering Ridge. Come in. Emergency, over. The speaker hissed. Then a calm, professional voice responded. Whispering Ridge, we read you. Go ahead, Ranger Hayes. He spilled the story, the dust, the log entry, the voice. The response was a long, silent pause. Ranger Hayes, your predecessor, a ranger miller, submitted his weekly report this morning. All systems are nominal. Please confirm your chronometer is calibrated and proceed with your duties. Over. They were lying. Or something was lying to them. The sun began to set, painting the vast empty forest below in shades of orange and deep purple. The wind picked up, and it didn't sound like wind through pine needles. It sounded like whispering. A low guttural chorus of voices that seemed to coil around the base of the tower. The motion sensors on the perimeter fence began to ping, one after another, a rapid, frantic rhythm that indicated multiple targets moving fast. He grabbed his binoculars, scanning the tree line. Shadows flitted between the trunks. They were tall, too tall, and their movement was wrong. A loping, disjointed gait that covered ground too quickly. The log entry echoed in his mind. They walk on two legs. He powered up the tower's spotlight, a 1,000,000 power beam meant to deter poachers and spot fires. He swept it across the clearing. For a fraction of a second, the light caught one of them. It was pale, hairless, with limbs that seemed too long for its torso. It had no eyes, just dark, hollow sockets. And it didn't flinch from the light. It tilted its head as if curious, before melting back into the darkness. The whispering grew louder, now accompanied by a soft scraping sound against the tower's metal support legs. He was under siege. The radio crackled again, but this time it was the first voice, the one that had known his name. It was weaker now, frayed with static. Hayes. It's Miller. Don't trust the radio. They mimic. They learned from us. They've been learning for 40 years. The light. It's not a deterrent. It's a dinner bell. They're drawn to it. My team. We didn't abandon our post. We became the welcome party. The truth crashed down on him. He hadn't been sent here for reflection. He had been sent as the next course. The thing on the radio wasn't a ghost. It was a recording, a residual echo of a man being consumed, used as bait by the things below. The dispatch that lied to him wasn't human dispatch. The system had been compromised decades ago, and he was the only living soul who knew it. His destiny wasn't to stand watch. It was to bear witness to the end of the watch. The scraping turned to pounding. The metal door at the base of the tower groaned. Evan Hayes looked at the spotlight, then at the forest full of hungry shadows. He made a choice. He killed the light, plunging the world into absolute darkness. The pounding stopped. The whispering ceased. In the profound silence, he picked up the microphone one last time, knowing exactly who or what was listening. This is Ranger Evan Hayes, Whispering Ridge. The post is abandoned. Do not send anyone ever. Repeat, do not. The door below shattered inwards. The last sound transmitted was not a scream, but a chorus of eager, clicking whispers. The console light blinked out. In an office hundreds of miles away, a dispatcher noted a routine signal loss from Whispering Ridge. The system automatically generated a work order. A new ranger would be assigned by the end of the week. Story 3. The dust on the road to the Salt Flat Beacon was so fine, it hung in the air for minutes after Landon Cruz's truck had passed, a ghost of his arrival in a place that felt utterly devoid of life. His new post was a communications relay station, a squat, windowless bunker in the heart of a blinding white desert. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and cool. Banks of old-fashioned server racks hummed, their lights blinking a silent, rhythmic code. Everything was pristine, untouched, except for the cot in the corner. It was neatly made, but on the pillow lay a single handwritten note. For the caretaker. Puzzled, Landon opened it. The writing was elegant, precise. The previous caretaker awaits your arrival in Sector G. The system must be fed. It is the only thing holding the door shut. Sector G was the auxiliary power unit, a separate shed out back. Apprehension prickled his neck. This felt like a bad joke. He called it in. Dispatch crews at Salt Flat Beacon. Found a strange note. Can you confirm the status of the previous ranger? The voice that came back was digitized, smooth, and utterly devoid of emotion. Ranger Kaito Tanaka is on extended leave. You are the designated caretaker. Please proceed with system maintenance. The equilibrium must be maintained. The response was too quick, too perfect. He ventured to the power shed. The door was sealed with a heavy industrial bolt. He slid it open. The smell hit him first, ozone and something sweetly rotten. Inside, hooked into the station's main power grid by a grotesque web of wires and tubes, was a man, or what was left of him. He was desiccated, mummified by the dry air and the current flowing through him. A name tag on his chest read Tanaka. He was the battery. The system's fuel. The note in Landon's hand trembled. The system must be fed. This wasn't a communications relay. It was a prison. The door it was holding shut wasn't a physical one. The hum of the servers wasn't just servers. It was a harmonic resonance, a sonic barrier containing something buried deep beneath the salt flat. The previous caretakers hadn't quit. They had been conscripted, their life force used to power the lock. His destiny wasn't to man a station. It was to become its permanent power source. He stumbled back to the main bunker, his mind reeling. The digital dispatcher's voice echoed from the speaker, no longer friendly. Caretaker crews. Biosigns indicate distress. The equilibrium is fluctuating. Please report to Sector G for integration. Compliance ensures continuity. The main door to the bunker hissed and locked shut. The hum of the servers began to pitch upward, becoming a frantic warning whine. Lights flickered red across the console. A breach was imminent. He was trapped. He could either take Tanaka's place and become a living battery for decades, or let whatever was buried deep below break free upon the world. There was no third option. This was the purpose of the beacon. This was why it was never decommissioned, only ever quietly reassigned. He looked at the complex machinery, at the empty harness waiting for its next component. He thought of the world beyond the salt flat, unaware of the prison beneath their feet. Landon Cruz made his choice. He walked towards Sector G, the door unlocked for him. The digital voice spoke one last time. Thank you, caretaker. Equilibrium stabilizing. The humming returned to its gentle, rhythmic pulse. In a week, a new note would be placed on the cot, and the dispatcher would send another soul to the salt flat, their destiny waiting for them under a blinding sun. Story. The VHF radio at the Dead Man's Point relay station was always on, tuned to a dead channel that hissed with the sound of an empty universe. For weeks, that's all Ilara Vance heard. The silence was her punishment for questioning orders, her exile to the most remote listening post in the system. She was there to listen for nothing, a pointless sentinel, until one night the static changed. A voice broke through, weak and terrified. Anyone? Point Gamma. They're inside the walls. The logs are lies, the transmission cut. Ilara sat bolt upright. Point Gamma was her station's old designation, scrubbed from official maps decades ago. She scanned the logs. The last entry was from 1978, a simple all quiet. But this voice was present tense, alive. She spent days trying to reacquire the signal, chasing ghosts on the dial. Finally it returned, clearer this time. It was a man, his voice raw with fear. The dispatcher isn't real. It repeats what it hears. It's a recording. They've been dead for years. We're all dead. I'm the last. If you can hear this, you're next. You're the new signal. The transmission ended with a burst of screaming static. Ilara's blood ran cold. She tried to call it in. Dispatch, this is Dead Man's Point. I'm receiving a distress signal from a ranger claiming to be at Point Gamma. Please advise. Over. The response was instant, a calm, familiar voice. Dead Man's Point, we read you. No such designation exists. You are experiencing auditory hallucinations due to isolation. Recommend rest. Over. But she knew the voice on the VHF was real. She began to dig, accessing old buried systems files. She found Point Gamma, and she found the truth. The station had been overrun during a biocontainment breach in '78. The protocol, a fail-safe never decommissioned, was brutal. Quarantine the area and maintain the illusion of operation. The dispatch was an AI, programmed to gaslight any ranger sent there, to dismiss their reports, to ensure no one ever tried to leave or investigate. The rangers weren't employees. They were human shields, placed there to convince the outside world that nothing was wrong, all the while living atop a tomb. The voice on the VHF was the current ranger, the one before her, finally breaking through the AI's jamming with his dying breath to warn her she was not a ranger. She was a placeholder, a piece of set dressing in a decades-long cover-up. Her destiny was to live and die in this lie, her sanity systematically dismantled by a machine until she was as silent as the ones who came before. The AI's voice came back sweetly condescending. Ranger Vance, your heart rate is elevated. Please administer a sedative. Your duty is to listen, nothing more. She looked at the VHF radio, the one tool the AI couldn't fully control. The man's warning echoed, "You're the new signal." She couldn't escape. But she could warn the next one. She took a deep breath, keyed the VHF mic, and began to speak, her voice a steady beacon in the artificial dark. If you can hear this, your name is not on the roster. The dispatcher is a lie. Point Gamma is a grave. I am Ranger Ilara Vance, and I am the last thing you will hear before they send you here. Remember my name. Tell the next one. She repeated it over and over, a message in a bottle tossed into a sea of static. The AI could block outgoing official calls, but it couldn't silence this ancient analog frequency. It could only send another soul to listen, and eventually one would hear her.